This is my second cup of tea today. It's just one of those days. I actually have this problem almost every Wednesday where it's one of those days because that's the day that I take my arthritis medication. I take it once a week and I feel really, really good for 5 days of the week, and then it starts to wear off. It's gotten better over time as I've been taking it, but it does start to wear off. So Wednesdays are usually my lowest energy days, and those are the days where I rely on caffeine a little bit more than I do the rest of the week. I actually love coffee, but I can't drink a lot of it because it gives me like major anxiety. And I should probably just switch to decaf, but I just can't bring myself to do it. So I thought I'd take you around today. I'm working on a couple herbal projects that I think you might be interested in. And before it rains, I'm gonna pop outside and show you what I did over the weekend in the garden, because it's finally March and I'm actually getting out there and getting some stuff planted, but also there's a lot of big changes happening outside that I've kind of maybe alluded to, but I haven't been ready to share. And I'm not still sure how much I'm gonna share with you about it this week. I just don't wanna jinx it, you know? It's just so good. And whenever something like this good is happening, I always build it up in my head. So we're gonna go outside and then I'm gonna show you how to make a herbal electuary, yeah, that's it, electuary. And these are really like stupid simple. Like this is basically what you're gonna end up with. There's a couple different formats that we can do this in. It's basically just 2 ingredients and you're probably gonna look at it and be like, what, that's it? Are you sure you didn't miss this step? But it really is that easy, and that's why I think they're a great introduction if you're curious about herbalism, but you maybe feel intimidated by a lot of the processes and techniques. This is basically foolproof. But first, let's pop outside and I'll show you what's going on out there. It still looks very bleak, to be honest, but there's little things happening that I'm really excited about. So the very first thing is that on my deck, I've replanted the green stalk planter. Not much to look at right now. It's covered in compost, because the thing with these, really the only downside, and it's true of any container garden, is you do have to be very mindful that you're feeding the soil fairly regularly because it gets depleted. So I topped it off with some compost from my pile of compost from Coast of Maine. And there were already some lettuces in here that had overwintered. And I actually just took the cover off because it's been so mild and they can handle a little bit of a chill. I'm not worried about it. But even the pockets that are empty, I did already put seeds in for cold loving crops. So we've got spinach in there, dino, kale, I think I did some endive, and a lot more lettuce. And with this, anytime it rains now, this top reservoir is open, and so the water can collect in here and slowly trickle down and keep it watered. But of course, while the seeds are still germinating, I am just keeping an eye on it. It's super rainy here and very just gloomy in general in March. So I'm not super worried about making sure that that soil stays damp until the seeds can germinate, but just generally keeping an eye on it just to make sure. I haven't got it hooked up to like the Bluetooth timer, like automated watering thing yet, because I don't have my hoses on or set up yet. But yeah, the green stalk is one of my favorite garden things that I've added that works really well for small spaces. It works really well for accessibility. So you're gonna hear me ranting about them a lot this year, I think, because they're just such a great solution for so many problems. And then the other really exciting big thing that happened is that I took the covers off of my raised beds. They actually have covers for these now. I had bought firewood covers for them that just happened to be the same size and shape. They were black, which I thought, oh, this will blend in really well. It ended up just looking like 6 caskets. It was super morbid. I was not a fan, so I wanted to get those off as soon as I could, especially because I wanted the under area to have access to sunlight now, since it's pretty much almost mushroom season and I have wine cap mushroom spawn inoculating in the wood chips under and around the raised beds. So I want to make sure that it's getting enough access to light and water right now so that hopefully we can get a really good flush of mushrooms very soon. Would really like to talk more about some low impact ways that you can add mushrooms to your garden, because there's a lot of ways that I think are super intimidating and challenging, but this way has been so easy and so hands-off, and I've loved it. I did a fresh layer of wood chips over everything, and I actually extended the wood chips. They used to end like right here, and instead now I'm going to have them go all the way into, this is like a strawberry and asparagus bed, and then we've got garlic and some rhubarb in here as well. This is more like a perennial bed, I'd say. So it's garlic, asparagus, rhubarb. And then I usually companion plant like calendula and chamomile. So the only downside I will say with these raised beds in particular is that you can't use regular raised bed soil in them because they're elevated off of the ground. in a way where they weren't built to support the weight of real soil. So they're actually filled with potting soil. And that is also from Coastal Maine. They really came through for me filling these up last year and this year. I just got a delivery this morning of 2 more pallets, one of potting soil and one of raised bed mix, because clearly I had to pull out a lot of soil from these beds that had like roots in it when I cleaned out the beds for this fall. I needed topping off, and they definitely need some additional amending with just a granular fertilizer. I use the Stonington blend from Coastal Maine. I did manage to overwinter some herbs. Those are pansies that self-seeded. And then I have a bunch of oregano in here. I tried to overwinter chives. I don't know if it's gonna make it. You can kind of see it there. I've got thyme in here, and I do have some rosemary, but I'm not sure it's going to end up in these beds. But these front ones are basically going to be an herb/tea garden. Because those beds had brassicas in them last year, they're like especially depleted of nutrients, so I want to kind of go light on the front row of beds this year. Clearly I don't have enough soil to be planting in these right now, but I did bank it up right up to here for the trellis because I did end up putting my sweet peas in early. This is probably 2 to 3, maybe even 4 weeks earlier than I've ever done them before, and I just want to see if they'll do well. So I just banked up existing soil and added some fertilizer just in this one area so I could get a head start on those. I've got a bunch of these containers just waiting to go back in place, and you'll kind of notice maybe that there's also this here, and everything's kind of pushed into this section of the garden. And there's a reason for that, which I'm going to show you in a second. This is like a mini tunnel, like my hoop house. You can't really tell, but these are like whiskey barrels under here with just like a hoop over it and then some extra greenhouse plastic I had. And I just threw like arugula, lettuce, kale, and spinach into each of these 4 containers. And I guess I might as well just say it. The hoop house is gone. Cleared out this whole corner of the yard. So the cold frame, which used to be there, you can kind of still see the green plants that were growing in it. I had 2 raised beds right here, and I had the hoop house right there. I was able to keep the whole structure, so I basically have a kit where I can set up another hoop house again in the future if I want to. So we cleared this area out because I'm adding a large gravel patio that's going to extend basically in that entire L shape. I'll show you. Patio is going to go from the basement door all the way out to a corner right where my finger is, all the way across to that rock right there, and then back up in kind of an L shape past where the hoop house was. So it's a really big area. It needs to be graded, and there's just generally a lot more to come showing you exactly what I'm doing in there. There's going to be new raised beds. There's going to be a lot of new features that I've wanted for a very long time that I'm very, very excited about. But they're big projects, and it's like a lot to do at once. It's all getting done in like the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or so. I took those frames that we had scraped out and I put them out here, and you can see there's still some bees and ants trying to get a snack from what's left, but they have really scraped these clean, so none of that honey went to waste. I can't confirm for certain that it was varroa mites that caused them to abscond the hive, but I've talked to a bunch of other beekeepers who agreed with me that that was probably what happened. There's no varroa mites on these frames now, so I'm not contaminating these newbies that are coming and taking the honey away. And actually I probably could have used it to trap a swarm, but I just don't have the time. So we've already ordered new bees. We usually get those at the very beginning of May. I have a new hive coming that I'm really excited about with some very exciting features. I will keep you updated as things progress over the next few weeks. A lot of exciting changes. I'm hoping the dust will be settled by planting time in May, but it's a lot. It's a lot to do at once, and I'm really front loading my year so that I can enjoy the summer as much as possible. Let's head inside and I will show you how to make the herbal electuaries. Hey, sleepyhead. Oh, you're so tired. Oh, hello, big stretch. Sage, did I wake you up? I hardly even made a sound. You're so dramatic. Oh, look at all this fluff. Oh my gosh, you're gonna be shedding your winter coat like crazy soon. So you can get 3 different end products from an electuary. This one is more kind of like a candy treat. You might melt under your tongue or just throw into hot water to make into a tea. They're all made with the same 2 ingredients, they just kind of come out a little bit differently. This is the more classic kind of version of the concoction where it's like a drippy like paste consistency. And I guess this one isn't really considered a classic electuary, but it's more like thicker on the honey side with larger chunks of herbs. So if you haven't figured this out yet, the 2 ingredients that you need are raw honey and herbs. And it's 2 ingredients, but like you can use more than 1 herb at a time. Usually I mix multiple herbs together. And this is great because honey in general obviously has a lot of health benefits, which if you don't know, raw honey in particular has a lot more of those active health benefits because it has not been heat treated. Using raw honey from my hive, obviously. You can get raw honey at a local farmer's market. It's just way better for your health, especially if you're taking honey to help you with allergies. Making sure that it's raw and local for your area is very important. Otherwise, it might not have all the same kind of allergens within it that you're trying to expose yourself to that you would actually encounter in your everyday environment where you live. It's got tons of antimicrobial benefits. And so when we combine it with herbs, we're actually infusing the honey with the benefits of the herbs that we're using as well. Some really easy beginner ones that you can start with for this are lavender, calendula, rose, chamomile. And literally all that I did was I pulsed those dried herbs. They need to be pre-dried herbs. If you're gonna use fresh herbs, you need to keep it in the fridge. It won't be shelf stable anymore because you're introducing water and moisture into the honey. But if you use dry herbs and you pulse them up really, really fine, then you can make these 2 different kinds of concoctions where basically you're using a very little bit of honey to create something that's more solid and like a little ball. Or if you just keep adding honey to it, you'll get something that's more like this consistency. And with these, you can let it rest for 2 to 3 weeks and the honey will really absorb those active benefits of the herbs and the flavors of the herbs. But you can also just use it right away. And obviously you're not going to be sifting out the herbs. So it's just an easier way to make it easier to tolerate if you're ingesting them because obviously they just taste like honey. In the case of something like this, you could use it in your tea to flavor your tea. You could spread it on toast, you could just eat it with a spoon, you could even mix it into your baking. But if the texture of either of these 2 options is a problem for you, you can use the herbs in more of like a whole larger state that's easier to strain out. You do just need to let this one infuse for 2 to 3 weeks. As a good rule of thumb for any kind of like infusion like this, doing it in a cool, dark place is ideal, but you really can't mess these up. A good ratio rule of thumb is to use about 1/4 of the container in herbs and then fill it the rest of the way with honey if you're doing something like this. Obviously with these, we want it to be a lot drier. And with this option, you're looking for this kind of like goopy, drippy consistency with the honey. If you're just getting introduced to herbalism, it's a really great, easy way to build your confidence around these things and start with herbs that are really easy and safe for everybody. If you're looking for things to do in March in your garden, I'd say first of all, focusing on this heavy lifting garden project like we were talking about earlier is a great idea because it's not super hot out yet. So it's really like the best time to be doing kind of manual labor like sheet mulching, getting your wood chips out, building any garden beds. It's a great time of year to work on preservation stuff. Any dried herbs that you might have picked last spring are probably nearing the end of their best viability. And so preserving them in the honey electuaries or something of that nature. Garden planting is obviously in full force. Let me know down below if you finished planting your garden or not. I think I've kind of gotten to a point with my garden planting where I'm kind of like, it's good enough. There's still blank spots and gaps and questions, but I know that it will be easier for me to just fill those things in the moment. And another thing that you can be doing this time of year is forcing blooms and propagating those blooms. These are elderberry stems. Obviously they've got a bunch of new beautiful leafy growth on them and I've just had them in water for a few weeks. At this point when they do have this leafy growth on them, it's a good idea to move them into soil so that they can continue developing roots. But this is a really great easy way to get additional plants for free from your own garden. I always end up with like 20 of these every year just when I do my spring pruning. I've got extra plants and then I can share them with friends or plant them in my own garden. But also it's a really great way to get blooms earlier indoors. So I right now just picked some forsythia And you could also do this with any of your fruit trees that are flowering. What you need to do is cut those off at a 45-degree angle, immediately stick them into really warm water and put them in a cool, dark room overnight. And then the next day you move them into a bright, warm room. And over the next days or couple weeks, they will start to leaf out and flower, and you'll end up with blooms indoors way before we're having flowers outside in general. Although I will say, we've actually already seen crocuses, and normally I actually went back and checked, and I have pictures from March 27th last year and the year before of the crocuses blooming. So everything is just so early this year, and it's kind of worrisome. Like, of course, as a gardener, I'm happy because it means I can plant things out sooner, but it's concerning that we're already at a point in our season that we would be in 2 or 3 weeks. The birds are all back. Everything just feels like it's on a very condensed timeline now. March is always exciting because there's this anticipation, right, of like we're almost at the end and there's so many good, big, exciting things happening. It's probably like the last few days I'll be running my stove inside all day long. Soon the windows will be open. I'll be spending my days outside more, which is just so important and vital to my mental health. I always start to feel really beat down at this point in the year. Just like, how much more of this can we take? But we got thick northern blood, we'll be okay. Let me know down below what you're doing in your garden in March. I think next week is gonna be a big one. I'm really hoping that I have a lot of exciting new things to share with you. But in the meantime, thank you so much for gardening with me, and happy growing.